Whoa! Did you just break into my house? Well, you kind of caught me at a bad time. You see, I'm actually in a class right now. You see, technology has actually advanced so much that school can be done entirely online.
Yeah, how's your other syllabus?
Well, while we wait for school to reboot, we might as well continue expanding our horizons by learning about game design with the original Metroid. I'll fix it in post. Metroid, the Nintendo series everyone knows, everyone praises, and nobody buys. This brilliant series of games has been tunneling around on Nintendo systems since the NES days, alongside the likes of Mario and Zelda. And just like those games, Metroid has left a major mark on the game industry, not only introducing one of the first major female protagonists that wasn't just Pac-Man in makeup, but creating a whole new genre of game. Mario pioneered platformers, Zelda pioneered adventure games, pretty straightforward, and Metroid defined Metroidvania. This is gonna take a while. The name Metroidvania doesn't really tell you anything about the game, making it a little daunting to outsiders. This is a problem with a lot of game genres, as some games just aren't simple enough to be described in 1 or 2 words. When someone tells me Nioh is a Souls-like game, I say, that's cool. I have no idea what it means, but sure. You really just need to dive in to understand these genres. So let's jump right in and see how Metroid defined Metroidvania. Metroid opens with an eerie, foreboding title screen. Pretty distinct at the time, as even more mature NES games usually had bright colors and an upbeat soundtrack accompanying them. You're given a brief prologue explaining your mission. Take out the Metroid threat on Zebes, and destroy Mother Brain. Then you are immediately dropped into planet Zebes, the mission now resting entirely on your shoulders. Your first instinct will likely be to run to the right, as that's how many side-scrolling games would usually progress. Not far along, you'll run into this wall with a small tunnel underneath, and you'll unfortunately learn that Metroid can't crawl. So you'll run all the way back and past the starting area, where you'll find the Morph Ball, which will now let you progress where you couldn't before. In the first mere minute of gameplay, Metroid already teaches you multiple key concepts. You can travel in multiple directions, progression is not necessarily tied to reaching the right end of the screen, and exploration is the key to problem solving. Going forward, when you see obstacles you can't pass, you move on and look elsewhere for a solution. Once you find the power you need, you can backtrack to progress. It's crucial that the game drills this into your head early, because once you reach the first Tunnel of Doom, the game really opens up into a large maze of branching paths and areas where you will run into a lot of dead ends. The game gives very minimal direction to the player, and this comes with pros and cons depending on how you look at it. On one hand, this makes you feel more accomplished when you make discoveries, as they are entirely your own. You are piecing together this world, isolated from any outside interference, which plays into the tone of the game. But on the other hand, you're all but guaranteed to get lost with Metroid's long corridors and repeating rooms. Seriously, look at these. These are considered 4 different rooms. Additionally, running around looking for an ability only to find it hidden behind some cryptic obstacle can be frustrating and makes you feel like the designers were actively working against you. I think there's a good balance to be had in giving the player independence while subtly guiding them in the right direction. This game, however, leans heavily towards player independence. While you traverse Zebes, you'll be running into a wide assortment of creatures, and of course, they're all hostile. These enemies serve 2 major roles. Obviously, they're obstacles first and foremost, but the player's interaction with them is also a benchmark of how powerful they've become over the course of the game. Leveling up your character is pretty standard in video games, but while most games were just giving you simple stat boosts or a temporary power-up, Metroid gives you permanent upgrades, which you can now use freely, the only restriction being your own skill. Early on, many of the enemies are too much to take on with Samus's limited abilities, making it optimal to simply maneuver around them. But as you gather upgrades, they slowly become more manageable. Perhaps too slowly though. For a majority of the game, I found myself avoiding enemies like they were copies of Other M. And by the time I reached the likes of the Ice Beam and Screw Attack, I had done so much weaving that I owned a new blanket. You see, Metroid's enemy placement is kind of all over the place. Some feel very intentional, some feel random, and some will hit you while you're entering or exiting a room. Who playtested this? And the developers did not hold back on the quantity of enemies either, often shoving in more than the game could even handle, thus predating Mario Maker by 30 years. The abundance of enemies in many rooms just feels cheap and is a very artificial way of increasing difficulty. There'll be times where I'll be pinballed between a few enemies and then... Well, that was dumb. Luckily I didn't lose too much progress, so let's just jump right back in. What the heck is this? Every time you die, regardless of how many energy tanks you pick up, you will always start back at 30 HP. And I feel confident in saying that this is the worst design element in the entire game. 30 HP is already very low for the beginning of the game, but when you reach areas like Lower Norfair, you'll encounter enemies that can do nearly 30 damage in one hit. So what are you expected to do? Farm energy for an absurd amount of time, and try again. For a game all about exploration and by extension trial and error, having death be such a major setback to the player's time and progress, it just doesn't work. The energy tanks are the only sort of checkpoints in terms of maintaining your health, so it's definitely useful to know all their locations going in if you don't want to spend half your playtime farming. Before you can reach the game's final area, Tourian, you'll have to take out Ridley and Kraid. These bosses are nothing to write home about. They both have slowdown from stuffing the screen with too many elements, and they mostly just jump and walk around. But to be fair, it was the NES, so that was basically the best you could do at the time. Once you reach Tourian, we finally learn what a Metroid is. You'll need to freeze them with your ice beam and blow them up with missiles. Don't jump in guns blazing though, because the Metroids are tough, and if you get swarmed, you'll have little chance of escape. I found it best to take them out one at a time to progress unscathed. Before you know it, you'll enter Mother Brain's lair, and will be bombarded with pixelated annoyance. Mother Brain herself doesn't attack. Instead you avoid her circles, break her container, and get this, shoot missiles. Once you've destroyed Mother Brain, a self-destruct sequence begins and you'll have 999 numbers to escape. This is a nice final platforming challenge, with these little tic-tac platforms. It's easy to screw up, but you get plenty of time, so it's entirely manageable. And here we are. Well, that was abrupt. We get a final epilogue, and then... a woman in a video game? Wait, they can do that? Metroid was actually one of the first games to include multiple endings, depending on how fast you beat the game, encouraging players to speedrun the game and find faster routes through the world. This led to a lot of experimentation and new discoveries across the title. Players found ways to sequence break the game, getting items out of order, skipping sections of the game, and completing it in record time. This would become a recurring staple of not only the Metroid series, but the Metroidvania genre as a whole. Metroid was a very revolutionary title, from its unique progression system, immersive worlds, and distinct tone. It defined its own genre of game, and that cannot be understated. However, innovation is not the same as execution, so while Metroid definitely innovated, its ideas weren't always executed in the greatest fashion. Metroid is a game with a tremendous legacy, but with that legacy, the original shows its age that much more. If you're looking to play this game today, I'd have a few suggestions to improve your experience. 1. Metroid has a password system, and some of these passwords will grant you additional abilities to improve the early game. 2. Metroid for Nintendo Switch Online includes save states and the rewind, so you can counter the game's cheating with your own cheating. And 3. The best way to experience the original Metroid is through the Game Boy Advance remake, Metroid Zero Mission. All the issues I had with the original are fixed in this remake. Exploration and progression are more streamlined, there are save rooms, energy restoration rooms, maps, more balanced enemies, less cryptic secrets, more abilities, better bosses, and smoother controls. Aside from novelty and nostalgia, there's really no reason to play the original over Zero Mission. If you're looking to play it today, it's still available on the Wii U eShop. The Metroidvania genre has expanded a ton over the years. The Castlevania series became the other half of the namesake Symphony of the Night onward, and many other series have tackled the genre, even some you probably wouldn't expect. In recent years, Metroid and Castlevania have kind of taken a back seat. Metroid has been in a bit of a drought for the past decade, aside from a poorly received title, a poorly received spin-off, and a well-received remake. It seemed Nintendo really didn't know what to do with the franchise. Ever since Retro Studios finished Prime 3 in 2007, they've been throwing the IP from studio to studio with varying success. And now over a decade later, we're back to Retro who are developing Prime 4. Meanwhile, Castlevania has been relegated to cameos, mobile, and gambling ever since Konami decided to be modern Konami. Instead, the stars of the Metroidvania genre in recent years have come from the indie scene. Hollow Knight, Ori and the Blind Forest, Axiom Verge, Guacamelee, Shantae, and so many others have filled the gap in the Metroidvania lineup over the past decade, and show no sign of stopping. Oh, sounds like school's back up and running, so let's get back to my education. Well, when I'm strapped for cash, I can always consult the good old organ bank. I mean, do I really need 2 lungs?